Kallemets, the entrepreneur in the nuclear space who's going to change the world. Thank you so much for meeting with me here at the IAEA Climate and Nuclear Conference. I'm so excited to sit down with you right now.
Yeah, that's a great opportunity.
Yes. Now we've got a chance to get to know each other a little bit over the last couple days. We got drinks, we got time this morning. Hearing your plan, and we'll get to that in a second, but I just got to start off by saying you inspire me. You literally are one of the most inspirational people that I've met in this space. And so we have to start from the beginning and hear your whole life story and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, actually, you inspired me over so many months of dark winter in Estonia, and how we started our company, and how many hesitations we had, and the Titans of Nuclear has been really so supportive friend of mine, of convincing me to continue buggering on, as they say.
What's your background? I know you were in Parliament at some point. You're Estonian.
Yes.
Where did your initial interests even begin?
Yes. So I have certain kind of family background of social responsibility. I was born in 1979, so I'm 40, so young, old. And my father was head of a kolkhoz.
What is that?
That was a Soviet kind of agricultural production unit.
Okay.
And he was a responsible person and was manager there, kind of. But I saw firsthand how non-working the Soviet thing was. And therefore, it is so exciting for me to see the Chernobyl series, which is actually, I think, much more descriptive of why Soviet Union failed, and together why the Chernobyl or RMBK reactor exploded. So I think it was cultural, all the management, mismanagement, and how based on lies the Soviet system was. And from my father and family, I developed a sense of responsibility for the people in general, and our nation, small nation of Estonians, 1 million people. And some people who have the ability to learn from new technologies and new solutions, that they have to deploy it. And we also in Estonia have the culture of those startup companies to really do new stuff and not being afraid of things.
Yes. I mean, that really does come across. I mean, you guys had this like tech revolution that other countries in your region could have done, but you guys actually did. You deployed internet capabilities across the country, and that led to this growth of a new tech sector. Amazing.
Yeah, what really works in Estonia is the personal identification card, which has a chip. So personal identification that you can log on, you can do electronic taxation that goes really quickly, voting electronically, and 140 services electronically. So when my son was born, I registered his name like within 30 minutes, and also registered for kindergarten place immediately. And so there are, it works.
How did you get interested in politics?
Yeah, I read in the high school a book by Milton Friedman called Capitalism and Freedom, and I got hooked.
Yes. Where did that take you, though? So you got hooked. What did you do with it?
Yeah, well, I started studying economics in the university, and stumbled into a school of economics called Austrian School, and studied at a little bit stateside in Mises Institute that is in Auburn, Alabama.
Amazing.
Yeah, translated some books by Hayek, and got into the party that used to be Prime Minister's party for 17 years.
And so what is that? How does that work? So you study in the US, you come back to Estonia, and how do you decide to get involved in politics, though? What does that transition?
Actually happened at the same time. So you join a youth organization and do work with other people there, and then discover, yes, I want to.
And youth organization is kind of like a farm team for politics? Like in baseball, we have like teams that like get people ready for the big leagues. Is this
it's kind of, yeah.
Okay.
So, you go step by step. And it so happened, yes, that very short time I was replacing another member of the parliament who got elected to the European Parliament.
And how do these parliamentary systems work? Do you have when you go in, do you have a group of people you represent? Is it a body of expertise you represent? What does any individual parliamentarian bring to the table?
Yeah, obviously you're a member of a party, of a faction, we call it that way, or caucus is in the States.
Caucus,
yeah. And there you have friends that you try to develop common view on certain position. It makes a difference whether you're in the opposition or in a government. And then obviously there are committees into which each member of the parliament belongs to, and then you elaborate on the bills that come forward and then vote on them.
And what committee were you in?
Economics committee.
Because of your background.
Yes.
And what were some of the interests that were salient at the time? What were some of the things you were voting on or that you had to make hard decisions about?
Yeah. Well, one particular subject what was very controversial in Estonia and a bit proud of, we voted for the same sex marriages to be, not marriages, but partnerships to be allowed in Estonia. It was very controversial and and the vote was very narrow, so
So every vote made a difference.
Yes, it made.
And what was the thinking at the time? Why was it controversial? Is it just kind of like old Soviet way of thinking, or what? And versus like the new modern, like how did that break down?
Yeah, I think you described it very well, and it just people are. And what describes also the current wave of populism or conservatism in happening in democratic countries now is that people somehow are afraid of or rejecting other people, and they have some kind of idealistic view of a world that actually never existed. So and that's a problem, certainly.
Energy. You became interested in energy at some point. How?
Yes, I did my master's thesis about listing of government-owned companies in Estonia, and one of the biggest utilities is a government-owned energy utility. And this was back in the day, 2008, engaged in nuclear new build project in Lithuania. And there was a 3 prime ministers agreement of Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia to look into the new build to replace the RMBK reactors in Ignalina that were shut down due to the joining of European Commission, because European Union saw the RMBK reactors as not having the protective shield and other elements as not being safe, right? So I looked at how nuclear makes economic sense, and I found out that it makes perfect sense that the old reactors that are operating in Western Europe, they're fundamentally money-making machines, and yes, there was some kind of sense of nuclear renaissance back in the day. So I got quite hooked on that and developed good relationship with Sandor Liive, former CEO of the company, who's now co-founder of Fermi Energia.
Yes.
We had also Estonian Nuclear Power Plant Association, like an NGO of promoting the idea, and really it got fair public acceptance of this idea of nuclear power. But what happened obviously was that there was some political infighting in Lithuania about the nuclear issue. But what happened also was emerged that the nuclear new builds in Europe of the large units was much more expensive than was expected, and also that Fukushima happened. And so Energia, instead of nuclear, they decided to invest into new oil shale furnace, which now dirty, but also it is really obvious with the increasing CO2 prices that it's uneconomical. And we in European Union have this CO2 pricing really strongly in place. So, in 2009, I was enrolled in Munich University of Technology nuclear economics course. I discovered there it's really appropriate in the nuclear field to deal with nuclear if you have a PhD. So, and I enrolled in PhD studies in Estonia, but because we didn't have empirical data, I moved over to study energy economics and oil shale energy economics, and finished quite recently. So, and the oil shale really goes to the heart of energy in Estonia, because quite last year, 85% of the power generation was from oil shale.
Whoa. You mentioned Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Do these are the Baltic countries?
Yes.
Do they make energy decisions together? Is it because the grid is more tied together? What's the relationship from an infrastructure perspective?
Yeah, right now they are totally inseparable. Like physically, it's impossible to cut down the interconnections. And we have signed with European Union all the documentation so that 31st of December 2025, Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania will be desynchronized from northwestern Russian, Belarusian power grid system to continental Europe power system. So
I see. So it's not connected right now, but there's plans to disconnect the interconnect on the Russia side, connect on the Europe side.
Yes, exactly. And there are major investments underway, hundreds of millions, to have the infrastructure built to be ready for that.
Wow. And these are this is just, I guess, big electrical equipment, transformers, synchronizers. These are things you have to physically connect to power plants in order to get the wave to match.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, so the plan is for that to happen. The three of you guys are tied together. You share in a common energy infrastructure, but that also means that you share a common energy market.
Absolutely.
That means if you build perhaps nuclear in Estonia, you can be selling electrons even in the short term to Latvia and Lithuania.
Absolutely. We are the same blood supply. I mean, we're the hands and heads of blood supply. And yes, every power generation supplies to the Baltic market. There is yes, in the price sense, they're in the Nord Pool. They are separate price areas. But factually, over last years, the prices in the Baltic market really have been very similar. And now, if there are more interconnections being built between Estonia and Latvia, and Latvia, Lithuania, it will be even more the case.
Yes. And do you guys also, just so we have the whole infrastructure laid out, do you guys physically have any cables that connect to Finland?
Yes, 1,000 megawatts, but this is insufficient to secure the full consumption, obviously. And Finland, by the way, also, despite the appearance that they have nuclear new build and they have some nuclear power plants, actually is in deficit.
They don't have enough energy.
Yes.
Oh my God. Even with Olkiluoto coming online with 1,600, crazy amount of energy.
Ministry of Economy and Employment of Finland declared to the European Commission that they will be in deficit but even 2030, 2040, even with the new Hanhikivi 1 coming online, because they will shut down, phase out coal, and which many of the Western European countries are doing.
The world needs nuclear more than ever right now.
Especially Europe, because in Europe, and this is not the case in the States, we have a binding target now of 80% reduction of CO2 emissions by 2050. This is absolutely binding, but there are discussions and policies put in place very soon. I believe this year that climate neutrality will be an official target of the European Union, meaning that no net emissions from all of the sources.
Does that go beyond the electricity sector? Does
absolutely.
That
includes
also
transportation. Yes,
industry?
absolutely.
Oh my God, that's a lot of power that needs to be replaced.
Absolutely. And meaning that, yes, electrification of the transportation has to happen, but also all the planes, trains, ships, all of it has to go of fossils.
Wow, by 2050.
Yes.
That is just such a tremendous amount of capacity that needs to be built.
Absolutely.
It's unbelievable.
Yes.
Okay, so before, and I know what this is leading to, but before we get to your latest endeavor, anything else in your career that is of highlight between what we discussed and now?
Yes, I worked in private sector and of a privately owned oil shale company. So some insights.
So you saw the other side of the
yes,
energy market.
and then I worked in the Ministry of Economic Affairs on developing mineral policy, and I was Deputy Director of Geological Survey. So I have hands-on experience in working out policy and how it really works.
And you've also probably mapped out the entire country as well, geographically too.
Yeah, it's not so difficult.
Amazing. Okay, so you've got academic experience, you've got political experience, you've got from inside the government experience, industry experience, and now startup experience. Tell me, how did this come together? Fermi Energy, how did this come together?
Yeah, well, it was summer last year when we discussed with some young nuclear engineers that Sander Liive, when he was CEO and preparing for the nuclear new build project, very wisely he sent to study in Stockholm, study nuclear engineering.
Smart.
4 people, could be more, but 4 is even definitely much better than many other countries have done. So they really have finished with PhDs and master's thesis and are working in the utilities in Scandinavia now. So we discussed amongst each other that yes, it's all nice and good to talk about nuclear, to have NGO and promote and so, but it doesn't deliver megawatts.
Right.
And we need megawatts instead of talking. And how is it possible to develop a business case around deployment of SMRs? Because we were noticing that the SMRs are in licensing in the States and in Canada. And it's much more credible than just presentations of yes, there will be something in the future. So this looked like commercially already a credible proposition. And yes, we started thinking that, yes, if you have a fair approval, if you have a site, if you have know-how and the team of around it who would be able to deploy it and move the project forward, if you have those elements in place, and in the end, you really would have a site where you would have an official approval, planning approval. We had a question, is that valuable? We called some people in the energy industry, how valuable that would be. It would be very valuable.
Yes. Early stages of project development.
Yes, and the fantastic thing is most of the people who discuss nuclear, they perceive it, it has to be billions of euros, had to billions of investment, and it's extremely expensive. But look at real estate development. There, the actual project development phase, you don't have the cranes and stuff.
Right.
The project development, which is most intellectually challenging, and also where you have to develop the team around, it's not so expensive. And also like IT business, also around the early stage of setting up the goal, technical parameters, or the how do you market it and the team around it, it's not so tremendously expensive. It's risky, whether you succeed or not, on putting together this team of capable people, then but we thought we'll give it a try, because we saw that the policy fundamentals and the CO2 pricing is started to move.
You see the market opportunity, and so Fermi becomes a project development company in a sense.
Yes.
A developer. You're
Yes.
like a real estate developer, but for energy projects.
Yes.
Specifically,
Nuclear.
small nuclear.
Yes, yes.
And so what does your exploration look like from there? You see the market, you know that you can fit into this market with smaller reactors. Was that part of the initial concept?
Yes.
And what do you do? How do you explore the small modular reactor market opportunities?
Okay, you have to do a lot of stuff. first you really have to have develop some closer understanding about the small modular reactors beyond the press statements. So you have to call up the people, you have to meet the people, you have to
fly around. You were in Oak Ridge recently.
Yes, and States and Canada. But so that's one of the investments. But we had engagements much earlier on, and you probably do some mistakes early on. And you actually learn by doing, and you can't do this learning unless you do stuff, and then you need to learn about the power market more seriously. Do some modeling. So you need to invest a little bit money. You need to find whether this basic premise finds enough traction. So you need to sell it to some investors. And we raised some money to the company, and fundamentally the fundamental business premise was how to say proven through those investment decisions. And
you've got some pretty smart people that you're working with right now. You want to tell us about the team?
Yes. So we have 6 founders, 4 PhDs, and former CEO of the utility, who's a well-known figure in the country, and then we have one physicist who was a physicist and developing an algorithm from CERN to find the subatomic particles, and he developed a company around how the algorithm could find words that people are learning better or learning worse. And now he has a startup company where he has raised 50 million euros. And is still a significant shareholder.
So your team has the technical expertise. You and another one of your partners now bring in the business expertise.
Yeah.
And it's about shaping all of this, putting this together, and then marching these projects forwards till there's actual nuclear deployment in Estonia.
Yes.
Tell me more about some of the steps to get there.
Yes. So what we realized immediately was that we need to have a clear and formal feasibility study, and not necessarily feasibility study in a manner that to look whether the project is economical, but also explaining the government what kind of steps are necessary if you go greenfield, and especially for SMR.
And greenfield means you're building on a site that has nothing on it right now.
Nothing of power generation, and in a country which doesn't have nuclear power generation, right?
A lot of learning curve.
Yes, but we have neighbors who have, and this is kind of helpful. Yes. And so we are together with our international and domestic partners putting together this feasibility study and launching or introducing it with the people who are writing the parts on 28th of January 2020 in Tallinn. And so I'm very happy how the things are moving now. Some parts that are being written by our Finnish partners are really kind of eye-openers, really good lessons to learn from Finland, how to do stuff. And we're getting good cooperation with the officials and politicians in Estonia. And then the public perception is also, let's say, we haven't found people or organization that would say, no, this is a bad idea.
Amazing. It's almost as if you've discovered there's a pent-up demand for this and you are about to unlock a Pandora's box of new opportunity.
Yeah, what has happened at the same time, because society and real life is wonderful, so that many things are happening at the same time, is that the CO2 price really has gone from 15 to 27, meaning power generation from oil shale has decreased 50% year on year, meaning as we speak, hundreds of people will get unemployed in this oil shale industry.
Wow.
Like 900 people out of 6,000. Yeah. And unfortunately, all of those 6,000 will be eventually very soon in 20 years out of job.
this could be an opportunity for new energy jobs. Keep people who are in the energy sector employed in the energy sectors working on a cleaner technology.
Partially, well, and at the same time, that it raised awareness that we have to get energy from somewhere. It has increased. What has happened is the increased awareness around the climate change, because it's been so warm. The melting of the ice, and what we as a Nordic people we don't have permafrost in Estonia, luckily, even though we are at the same parallel that is southern Greenland, right? But going east in Siberia, there's a huge permafrost.
Because they don't have the warmth from the water to help moderate that area, I guess.
Yes, and so they have had extensive forest fires this year in Siberia, and it's heating up the soil, and a lot of methane. We're talking hundreds of millions of tons of methane are emitting,
which is another greenhouse gas.
40,000 times more potent than actually CO2, so. The awareness of those events happening and has increased significantly over the last 12 months in Estonia. So all those elements put together, these are the reasons that not even green people in Estonia or the environmentalists who maybe 10 years ago were vehemently opposing nuclear. They recognize now that yes, we need all non-carbon or non-fossil sources to be utilized to achieve climate neutrality.
Well, I think you'd have to be a real hypocrite to care so much about the climate and then just be afraid of nuclear and not even consider it. You know what I'm saying? Like, you have to really have a disconnect in your values if you're going to be both anti-nuclear and say that you care about climate change.
Yeah, but I believe this is what is also important is how you communicate with people. So instead of Facebook and Twitter to engage with those people, you have to sit down with them and talk with them. And yes, let's go over the numbers.
Yes.
Yeah. And what do you care about?
What are the forums like for that in Estonia? What's the culture like? Do you guys have public meetings, town halls? What is it like to communicate?
We know. I call a person, Yuri or Tarmo. We should meet and we should talk about.
And you're doing this one-on-one, or are there more public forums that you can?
We can do it.
Like, can you get on the news? Is there Estonian news that you can go on and make your case to the people and say, "Listen, we could become leaders"?
I think more relevant when talking with people who have who need to be. Little bit change their view. Is more effective to have a less public. Because otherwise people start to behave and start to have a different kind of not focusing on the facts and engagement with the reality. Yeah. But engagement with the perceptions.
Yes.
And that's something that I would like to see, that people engage with real information and data.
And it's important to communicate with people emotionally too, to speak to them about what their values are. I know earlier, you and I have spent some time talking about social values at large and how important it is, even let's say just beyond the people, let's say industry, how important energy is for industry to continue and thrive and continue to allow for a prosperous society to function.
Yeah. So Estonia, due to this oil shale, we have been ourselves the power generation source for other countries. And we've taken some pride in that. And also there is some knowledge in the society that, yes, if you don't have the power supply, there are consequences to that, very immediate consequences. And for industry people, there are very immediate consequences. So if you have a wood or food manufacturing like milk or meat products, then you have to, there are continuous production processes. Yes. And if you're discontinuing it, even for half a minute, then you have to clean the piping, clean the systems, and start from scratch. And so it takes hours of additional work to clean the pipes, clean the systems if the power supply gets cut. And that's why the Finnish industrial companies have been shareholders of power production even before they had nuclear power. So this Teollisuuden Voima, which is the main shareholder of nuclear power plants of Olkiluoto, they had a company set up between themselves already before that. And only then they decided to go from hydro and other sources to nuclear.
And so industry actually sees the lack of electricity as, or even like intermittent production of electricity as almost an existential threat to their business.
Yeah.
And like any good business, you have to mitigate risk. And the way that they mitigate risk is getting involved in the energy production side.
Yes, absolutely. And I see in Finland, because this is one of the Western countries where you have actually 2 nuclear new builds going. And Finland, with 5 million population, is considerably smaller than even UK or United States, where you have 2 reactors new builds going on. And they didn't have in Finland any like backlash with Fukushima or Chernobyl. People still trust. And one of the reasons why I believe this is the case is the ownership structure, that they really have
more stakeholders.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And they have also municipalities, municipality-owned energy companies.
And so what's your thought there?
Municipality-owned utilities who are shareholders in the nuclear. So there is understanding and also benefit sharing throughout the society. And this is a totally different model, let's compare to, say, France or Germany, where you have major big utilities which are owned by anonymous shareholders.
Nobody likes them, nobody cares about them, they're not part of the community. So what's your idea to facilitate this in Estonia? Can you bring together a coalition of industrial stakeholders that might get involved in a project like this?
That's our job. Let's say not fully cover the ownership base, but some share of it at least.
A little skin in the game.
Definitely, and they feel the heat. Yeah. Some people we have been talking already, they absolutely feel the threat, A, from intermittency, and B, also from renewables. Because renewables you have to subsidize. And the more you subsidize, the more expensive it gets, right? Obvious. And if you develop this kind of renewable dependency, then you're subsidized even more. Yeah. So
it's a vicious trap. Yeah.
Yes, and so this is one of the reasons why they see quite a good financial motivation to be involved.
Do you think that there's going to be a reckoning throughout Europe as they deploy more and more renewables and we kind of see how it's affecting the grid in different ways? Do you think the perception will change at some point and they have to realize that people actually begin to realize how the electricity infrastructure works?
Yes, I've done very closely the numbers because our European markets are all interlinked. And if I look the news, all public news about coal phase outs, very positive actually, happening in Netherlands, Germany, even Finland has some coal, UK, Belgium, also France has some coal. And they do, one plant, but nevertheless, they're coal phase outs. And at the same time, a lot of nuclear being shut down. Even in the UK, the old AGRs, they're going to go down within next 10 years.
How can an entire continent shut down all of the base load power at the same time? This is crazy.
Yeah, well, this is really amazing story that the European Union is gathering national climate and energy plans. I've read the North European ones, and there's a lot of, empty talk there, that we develop interconnections, and the interconnections are maintaining our security of supply. But behind the interconnections, you should have capacity. Because if you don't have capacity, And if everybody is hoping that Norway and Sweden, who are now exporters, will supply to all of the Europe, security of supply, this is mathematically impossible.
Yeah.
So I see it is highly likely, extremely likely, or I would say 100% likely, that there will be blackouts in European Union significantly coming 2023, 24, 25. When
For the
Germans,
developed world, that's just crazy to think that we've gone back in time, right?
but this is happening now in California.
Crazy.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yes.
Okay, so so tell me, what are some of the other challenges along this journey that you've been through so far in thinking and talking to people, investigating, how do I deploy nuclear? What are some of the things that you've learned along the way that have been surprising to you and have informed your mindset? Have you had any specific experiences when you learned about this or learned about that just made you think differently about your approach?
Quite a lot. So we started with the keen interest into molten salt reactors. So I've been participating at the major molten salt reactor development conference in Delft, which is where some of our conference took place, and also recently last week in Oak Ridge molten salt reactor conference, and discussing also with regulators and some developers. So while some of the companies are doing really good job, it seems some of the companies really don't have the understanding of what it takes to build a nuclear power plant.
Right.
So it's a major undertaking because you can't get around it's very difficult to get around the International Atomic Energy Agency regulations. So and you have to be honest, molten salt reactors are more complicated with their physics and thermodynamical management than current generation of light water reaction or current light water reactor systems.
And supply chain too for components. It's like, a lot of what goes into a power plant is just to maintain water in a good steady state, right? You've got like your demineralizers, you've got your chemistry control, and this has been worked out across thousands of suppliers, across tens of thousands of power plants for the last 100 years. How to handle water. We've got all the tools, the equipment, the expertise. If you're moving to a new coolant, all of a sudden you've got to develop an entire supply chain and expertise for like the thermometer that's going to go in there, the pump that's going to move it around, all of these things that haven't been developed across tens of thousands of plants.
But I would also as strongly state this is absolutely necessary. It has to be done. The molten salt reactors are absolutely necessary for the future. As soon as possible. And I wholeheartedly support the efforts in Canada and the United States by their governments in supporting the R&D programs and also the licensing and testing programs moving forward. And there's a lot of excellent work being done because we have to produce millions of tons of hydrogen. Yes. And producing even like 50,000 tons of hydrogen, it takes 200 megawatts of capacity. So it's we're talking there, and because currently in Europe we have 40 billion euro market for hydrogen, and with that is 100% almost produced from a methane stream reforming with so high CO2 emission.
Yes.
So it has to be all replaced by 2050 with non-fossil.
Yes.
That's a huge market.
Huge market.
And light water reactors are not so fit for that.
Because you're saying they're operating at the lower temperatures.
Yes.
Though one could imagine, to push back a little bit, one could imagine if they became cheap enough, you could use the electricity to help boost the temperature, or even the next generation of light water reactors that might be able to operate, like ultra supercritical light water reactors that might be able to operate at higher temperatures too.
But I would argue that given the challenge that we have even with the power generation in European Union, we need hundreds of SMRs being deployed.
Thousands. Let's get to thousands. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? Listen, at the end of the day, we have to replace all fossil fuels on planet Earth. That is tens of thousands of big reactors, which means we're going to need thousands of SMRs deployed too. I mean, think of it. That's the vision that we have to capture here. And I bet that if we speak like this and people realize the economic opportunity, we bring more stakeholders in.
I would start moderately with the 2 units that we are planning for Estonia, 300s.
I'll get you up to thousands.
Yeah. But at the same time, what I'm really also seeing, and in this International Atomic Energy Agency conference where we are at, and discussing with other people from the crowd of different countries in Europe. If I talk to them about our business model in how you finance the development of the company and moving it forward, developing partnerships with the utilities, actually providing to the utilities, which are government owned and don't want political risk, you're providing them service of reducing site and political risks involved of nuclear SMR deployment. And if you do that, you're creating value.
It's perfect. It's perfect. It's perfect.
And
I want to see, not to give you too much competition, but I want to see 100 companies like yours emerge.
Absolutely.
Across the world.
I want to help all of them.
Yeah.
I want to be shareholder in all of them.
Yes, absolutely. You could really pioneer a model here, even just from a business perspective. This is business innovation. A lot of times, I speak to entrepreneurs across the country and now across the world too. And everyone thinks that innovation has to be technological, but no, there can be business model innovation too, and that's what you're doing.
Absolutely. Apple is not producing it on his own, the iPhones.
Yeah.
He's buying the service from companies abroad, actually.
Yes.
So they're doing the design and the business model around how this machine works. So I totally agree with you that the business model and putting all those elements in a particular situation together is what is the value creation at the highest level.
As we wrap up here, maybe you could spell out to us your vision for the future, but also why this is important to you.
Okay, we have to really secure power supply at the same time as moving towards the climate neutrality. And I wholeheartedly believe that. One of the reasons being that we need to cut the fossil fuel producers that are now getting money and financing their authoritarian policies. We need the democracies to be strong and to move forward with our societies and the civilization of just burning stuff, and that's pretty obvious. And secondly, I really want Europe, my home, which I take also very seriously to my heart, to be successful, not just being this kind of statist, muddling along stuff. And I believe that this SMR technology is really has a good potential of embracing kind of private capital-driven energy deployment rather than murky fossil fuel deals that have to be done by politicians, or that all the utilities have to be controlled by government-owned companies. I believe that capitalism is the way forward.
Kalev, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you for what you're doing, pioneering a whole new space, and I look forward to watching you in the years to come.
Thank you.